Hello, my little sinners and saints. Tonight we're going to try to do something else. I have repeatedly tried to do this, so we'll see how this one works out. Maybe, maybe not. Okay, tonight the dark side is telling scary stories. I don't know how scary they are, but I'm telling some stories here, people. One night when I was in the seventh grade, I had two friends sleeping over, and we were sleeping in the basement. My brother, who was around 7 at the time, had bought himself a new Furby. He got bored with it after a few weeks, then it sat untouched in the basement closet. As you know, Furbies sometimes begin to talk when they are not moved and when they're moved. Yet this one, yet they only speak gibberish, not English. This night, it was around 4 a.m., and we had all the lights out and it was silent. We were laying in bed or laying down, getting ready to go to bed, and out of nowhere, we hear Furby's voice say, "Come play with me." And then it laughed in the Furby voice. At this time, I didn't think it could speak English. So we wrote it off and went to bed. To my horror, in the morning, when I went to check it, not only does it not speak English, it didn't have any batteries. Whoa. I was a freshman in college in the Philippines. It was a late it was late at night, and my friends and I were on our way home after watching a play at the campus theaters. As we were nearing the college of the education building, I looked up into the sky and I saw a woman jump from the topmost floor. I told my friends and we ran over to the front lawn of the building to help the woman. But when we got there, she was gone. The guard came rushing over to us because I was so loud about it. My friends didn't see her because I was the only one who felt the urge to look up. The guard helped me calm down from near hysteria. Then he told me I must have seen the ghost of the woman who had jumped to her death from the building years ago because it was the anniversary of it. Whoa. These aren't terrifying, but just come on, people, have fun. In 2015, I went on a trip to DC for the 4th of July with my family. This was our second trip to DC, so we decided to take our last day of the trip, the 4th of July, to go visit Mount Vernon, George Washington's estate in Virginia. In the middle of the day, scorching hot, and there was absolutely no air conditioning in the house, aside from a few fans placed sparingly. I'm a huge history buff, so I was excited about touring the home and knew a lot about George Washington and his state previously. So I knew that he passed away in his bedroom in 1799, but that's definitely not what I was thinking about when our tour guide led our group upstairs to see said bedroom. His bedroom was a had a lot of really delicate artifacts in it, so we weren't allowed to go inside. And there were even little plastic barriers preventing us from doing so. But you could stick your head into the room and look around. For some reason, I was the only one in the group who decided to take a look. When I stuck my head into the room, I was immediately struck by how absolutely freezing cold it was in there. And I don't mean it was a light breeze. It was as if I had stuck my upper half of my body into a walk-in freezer. I was confused by this. There didn't seem to be any air conditioning in the room. So I looked around to try to see if there was any fan or AC unit that I hadn't noticed before, but I didn't see one. I decided to take my head out of the room and ask the tour guide why it was so cold in there. But then I realized that I couldn't move. I was paralyzed from the waist up. Every part of my body that was in the room was completely stuck in place. I struggled to pull myself out, but couldn't. I started to panic and tried to open my mouth and call for help. But when I opened my mouth, no sound came out. All of a sudden, from the other side of the room, where there was a little piece of furniture, a mirror, and a water basin, probably where Washington washed his face and shaved in the morning, I felt what I could only describe as a pair of eyes staring at me, almost like the sensation of someone staring at you while you're sleeping. I didn't see a figure or anything, but I felt this huge and intimidating presence walk towards me and stare me down. It was horrifying, and I physically could not tell you how much time had passed at the moment because it really felt like it had been an hour, but I guess it was only just a few seconds. After a while, I finally broke free from the paralysis and almost fell backwards onto my butt. My mom asked me what was wrong, and I told her I wanted to leave. She didn't believe me when I told her the story later, but it still scares me to this day. When I was around 8 or 9 years old, my mom told me to go to bed early on a summer night. So I threw a fit and began screaming at my mom, "I hate you." My mom always told me never to go to bed angry because the devil can possess you and steal you. After slamming my bedroom door shut, I turned off the lights and lay down. It was near midnight and I was still angry. Suddenly, I hear tapping on my door. I had chills run up my arms. Then I heard a voice calling me. It sounded like my brother's voice, but he was calling me by my nickname that my mom used for me. I figured it was my brother, so I started yelling for him to go away. The voice taunted me with the nickname till my mom ran into the room and turned on the lights. "What are you yelling at?" I sat up and noticed that she was the only person in the room. I told her my brother came into my room and he started calling my name. She looked pale. "Your brother is sound asleep in his room." It was exactly 12 o'clock midnight on the dot when my mom walked into my room and it was freezing, even though my window was closed and the AC was turned off. There was something in my room that night, and to this day, nobody in my family understands what happened to me. All I know is I will never go to bed angry again. Last year, I went to the coast of Rhode Island for my cousin's wedding. When we were just a few miles from Lizzie Borden's house, we get to the wedding venue and it's an old, big, creepy looking mansion. Immediately, my spooky senses were tingling. I had made offhand comments about how it seemed like this would be a place that would be haunted, but within a few minutes, I was distracted by the festivities, and all my thoughts of ghosts escaped my mind. The wedding was out behind the mansion where we could see the water. So everyone had moved, excuse me, moved from inside to the back lawn. All afternoon, my cousins and my aunts had me grab things for them. Eventually, one of them asked me to go get a hair clip she had left in the dressing room area earlier that day. The dressing room area was in the upstairs part of the mansion. Only people in the wedding party were allowed to access up there. As I ascended the red velvet spiral staircase, the spooky feeling started to come back to me. Suddenly, I felt like every portrait on the wall was watching me with my every move. As I went into the dressing room, I decided I would just grab the hair clip and run. I walked to the large table and found the clip. As I was getting ready to run out of the room, I saw my reflection in the mirror, and on the other side of the room, my hair had gotten all messed up from running around, so I stopped to fix it. As I was standing facing the mirror with my back to the open door of the room, I saw what looked like a form of a person standing in the doorway, just over my shoulder. Frozen, I stare at the white figure of a person in the mirror for a second. Quickly regaining my composure, I turned around and looked at the door. No one was there. I swear I had just seen an old white gentleman. I couldn't make out his clothes that he was wearing, but I definitely knew that he was not one of the people in the wedding party, since we were all an Asian family. So if it was a random guest, they would not have been allowed to come upstairs where I was. While I was standing looking around in confusion and mild fear, the door in the bathroom began shaking and banging like somebody was locked in there and they were trying to get out. Thinking it was just the bridesmaid that was stuck in the bathroom, most of the doors were creaky and jammed frequently. I went and easily opened the door. No one inside, there was no one inside the small bathroom. Scared out of my wits, I made a run for it. In my fancy dress and 6-inch heels, I ran back down the red velvet spiral staircase and didn't look back until I was outside. Later that night, the bride's hairstylist told me he saw the same apparition of a man just minutes before I did. Spooky. That's a good movie. Several years ago, I was deeply involved in an amateur ghost hunting. A friend of mine told me her home was, in fact, haunted. As I jumped at the chance to tackle the challenge, we first conducted an EVP session in the master bedroom where my friend's grandparents died. After asking questions like, do you want us to leave? And what are you going to do if we don't leave? Several people in the group immediately began complaining about headaches and stomach aches. I was met with responses like yes and harm. We began hearing noises from the kitchen where we moved to conduct another session, and the room became drastically hot for a January in New York City. And as I raised my hands in prayer and began to close my eyes, as I prayed, a member of the group told me my hands were being pulled apart by nothing. As I opened my eyes, I became disoriented and had blurry vision. And I heard several people in the group saying something was coming up the stairs from the basement. I got up and noticed a horned shadow creeping up the steps. I yelled at it, do your worst. I'm not afraid. I woke up on the floor a full 5 minutes later. I managed to get out of the house just to be told that I smelled like ashes and fire. I got home and noticed what appeared to be a handprint on my ankle, and it was hot to the touch and extremely painful. I had gone to church and explained what happened, and the priest offered to anoint the mark with holy water. And when it came into contact with my skin, it felt like I was being set on fire. For several weeks after, myself and one of the members of the group began to have dreams of being threatened and taunted by a man in a black suit. My grandfather built a house for him and his first wife. Sadly, she died falling down the basement stairs. Later, he met my grandmother and they had my mother. Years later, my grandfather passed away, leaving my grandmother alone in the house. A friend of hers had stopped by to see if she wanted to sell the house. She gave him a tour, and afterwards, her friend handed her a card. The minute her hand touched the card, a loud crash came from upstairs. For reference, the upstairs is laid out like a square hallway that loops around a pillar. And the back of that pillar is a bookcase. The shelves in the bookcase had collapsed inward, like someone had slammed them down. Books were found in every room upstairs, behind beds, in closets, and even in rooms on the other sides of the pillar. My grandma never really believed in ghosts, but this event freaked her out. I thought that was funny. So this happened to me more than once in the house where my family used to live. From what I was told, there was a ghost in the house that resembled me, so much to the point where my own mother thought it was me. My first incident was back in 2011 and 2012. I was in my bedroom and I heard my name being called. So when I responded from upstairs, I heard my mom say, "Never mind," very nervously. Naturally, I go down the stairs and ask my mom why she was calling me. She then said, "I just saw you standing in the kitchen. I looked over and said, I've been upstairs the whole time." And she replied, "I saw you go into the kitchen and open the cupboard." The next incident was with a family friend named Jamie. The layout of the house was kind of odd. There was a hallway that connected into the kitchen, but it had two openings, so it created a weird open wall situation. Anyway, there was a mirror hanging on the wall, and you could see the reflection of the TV in the mirror. So one day I went to the amusement park with Jamie, and Jamie, when we got back, Jamie looked at the mirror, I don't know what's wrong, and circled around the hallway situation and asked the other person at the house if I was still there. When she replied no, she left. Jamie said she saw me sitting on the couch from the reflection of the TV. The TV was not on. The last incident was with my cousin. He had spent the night and we both fell asleep on the couches downstairs in the living room. He had woken up and went upstairs to brush his teeth in the bathroom. They had one of those giant mirrors that covered the entire wall from the counter up. And with the bathroom door open, you could see into my room and my brother's room. He said he was brushing his teeth, and when he looked up into the mirror, he saw me standing in my bedroom watching him brush his teeth. And he said, "Oh, I didn't know that you were awake." He didn't get a response. Once again, I was asleep downstairs in the living room. The next thing I knew, my cousin was shaking me, telling me to wake up and that he had just saw me standing in my bedroom. We lived there for about 9 more years. My room was always the coldest room in the house, especially in the closet in my room. It was freezing in there, and we were told that it was a portal. I always heard hangers moving around, and I would feel someone or something sitting on the edge of my bed. In the basement, especially if you weren't alone, you could hear footsteps constantly. I never felt too scared or threatened, but the idea of a ghost looking at me creeped me out. I lived in a house that was built in the early 1900s. When it was built, it was intended to be used by a doctor performing checkups and worked in his own home. One room at the front of the house freaks me out nearly every time visitors come by. And my friends growing up always described the strange feeling when walking past the room. Some would even run past or try to avoid the room. The house consists of a long hallway where you have to walk past every room before reaching an open space. Something that been told has been quite claustrophobic and has scared some of my friends who used to visit often. Back in 2015, my then girlfriend explained that she was seeing snakes, excuse me, in the corner of the room snarling and a snarling dog in the other. This was all during the middle of the night. I had experienced what I felt was hallucinations of a lost child and a strange man that I assumed was one of my mother's friends. When I asked who it was, she said that there had been no one matching that description who had entered the house. During the night when leaving my room for a drink or go to the toilet, I never felt alone. I felt like something was there but not acting up. Now, as an adult, I walk into that front room and I still feel cold and a sensation that I can only describe as emptiness. To this day, I wonder what kinds of patients the original owner had and if any of them died on the property. Okay, this is the last one. I was laying on my bed watching videos on the internet when I thought I heard a knock at my door. I took off my headphones and listened for another knock. I didn't hear anything, so I put my headphones back on and continued to watch a video. Shortly after, my video started buffering at exactly 6 minutes and 66 seconds, and I felt someone tug at my foot, which was hanging off the bed. I quickly got up and looked under my bed and around my room to see if my sister was playing a trick on me, but I was alone. I ran out of my room and saw a tall, dark figure standing at the end of the hallway. I closed my eyes, and when I opened them again, it was gone. When I was about 9 years old, I had a friend that introduced me to the urban legend of Bloody Mary. We used to play around and dare each other to summon her into the bathroom, one at a time. One night I felt daring, so I went into the bathroom and did it, except I ran out before I could see anything and I went to sleep. I woke up about 4 a.m. and heard footsteps coming up the stairs. At first, I thought this was probably my parents, except I began realizing that the footsteps never seemed to make it to the top. Then I thought it was the tooth fairy. Remember, I was 9. I had lost the tooth that night, except I looked under my pillow and it was gone. The steps started getting louder and faster and closer and sounded as if someone was already getting to the top of the staircase. But I went to check and there was nobody there. Both of my parents were asleep. I got so scared that I pulled the covers over my head and the steps suddenly came to a halt. I slowly uncovered my face, let out a sigh of relief, and went to turn my body towards the wall when I felt a hand crawl down my forearm and bang it against the wall with full force. I had zero control over my arm, which is what freaked me out. When I woke up, there was a dent in the wall. Okay, maybe we'll do another one. About 4 years ago, I was home alone with my newly 3 year old daughter. My husband was working late, so I knew I was in charge of bedtime. I didn't like being alone in the house because I always had this off feeling like someone was watching us. And my mom was always superstitious. My daughter and I went through a routine. And when it was time to put her pajamas on, she told me that she had a friend who would stay with her whenever she was put into bed. So I asked her who it was, and she looked at me and said, "Well, you can't see him, Mommy. He's standing right behind you in my closet. He's very big. How can you miss him?" We moved less than a year later, That's it. They moved you less than a year later. Okay, there was one more, but we're just going to skip it. I hope that y'all enjoyed this. Hopefully, y'all get better at all this crap and it won't look so horrible. And I appreciate you joining me as always.
And have a spooky, spooky night.
Thank you all again, and I will see you later.